What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like, subscribe to the channel as you tune in and check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to do a quick video on Shaquille O'Neal, Big Shaq, man, and just point out some ways that like Shaq changed the game without people in ways that people don't even know, right? And in this way because like the NBA really couldn't expand globally until you had Shaquille out the league. And people when people talk about like the game is a basketball is a worldwide game, right? And the rest of the world caught up with the NBA, which I don't believe that the rest of the world caught up with the NBA. I think the NBA now plays a European style of basketball. But with Shaq in the league, they had to hold off like expanding the game, because Shaq was just too dominant. Now remember when Shaq they brought players in to go up against Shaq, like they brought in Yao Ming, then the guy Sabonis, and Shaq was just too big and too powerful for those guys to match up with. Shaq dominated those guys. Just like Shaq dominated like the guy, like American born ball players, Shaq dominated them too, right? But in order the league to expand or bring in foreign basketball players, it had to wait for Shaq to get out the league. Because as long as Shaq was in the league, and this people don't realize the impact Shaq had. As long as Shaq was in the league, other teams had to have players that could combat Shaq and his physicalness. Don't get me wrong, they still got dominated and stuff like that. But you had to have like very good power forwards, and you had to have some centers. You had to have a big center in order to go up against Shaq, which meant that if you're trying to bring over like the European ball players, like the low post ball players, they're going up against Shaq, which everybody knows is going to be a mismatch. But these teams still have like Charles Oakley, Lonzo Mourning, like big centers and big power forwards who were really physical and was used to playing that physical type basketball because they had to go up against Shaq. And a lot of people don't when they speak about that. That's how the game could change. The game changed because once Shaq was out the league, then you could phase out, the Davis brothers that they had in Indiana. Um, who else? Everybody had big power forwards, man. You had Charles Oakley and you had Anthony Mason, all the Alonzo Mourning, uh what was the guy named Grandmama? But you had these guys because you needed multiple guys to go up against Shaq because they were going to for the fouls. You know what I mean? You were just going to absorb some of those fouls when you went up against Shaq. Let me see, Hakeem Olajuwon. You had all those big physical guys in the league, and the European basketball players just played a different style, right? They didn't play that as physical as like teams did in the NBA. So it was different for them. And like I said, everybody got dominated from by Shaq, no matter where you came from. But the league was just too physical. And so if you want to be able to bring over the foreign born basketball players, then you had to phase those centers and those power forwards out the game to make room for a different style of play. Not that it's better, but in my opinion, but it's just a different style of play, man. And people don't really acknowledge that. Like with Michael Jordan was, he was good for basketball because you could bring over a basketball player like Tony Kukoc. They had Drazen Petrovic, like like the smaller guards or the wingmen, and they could be, they'll have a better shot at success than somebody, like a big man in that low post. It just was the NBA just was too physical. Their style was just so much different than what the big men that come from Europe and in different places around the world. Even if you look at the NBA now, right, where you have the Joker, who is a I don't know, like they list him as a center, but he passed and everything like that. So they call him a point center. But and I laugh when people try to compare the Joker to Shaq, and they try to say that Shaq would the Joker was better than Shaq, which in my opinion, like I said, there's no comparison. I don't even like comparing the two different eras because of the style is different. But if you look at how Shaq dominated these guys, man, physically, it just was, no way in the world. You put the Joker up against Shaq, no way in the world. He not fast enough. He not athletic enough. He not strong enough to deal with somebody like Shaq. And people say, well, the Joker would pull Shaq from under the basket. He probably would. But Shaq still had really good foot speed, enough to keep up with the Joker. So now, Shaq probably wouldn't have challenged him at that 3-point line too much. But you gotta figure the Joker gotta go down the other end. And the Shaq is getting layups. And a layup is a higher percentage shot than a 3-point. Even if the Joker is shooting at 40%, he's shooting at 40% from three. Shaq is like layups, man, no way, the Joker can deal with Shaq down there in the paint, man. On top of that, the Joker would get into foul trouble trying to, like just like a lot of other people did. So when you try to compare eras, I just think it's funny. You comparing an era that's just so physical compared to, you talking about physicality, comparing that to finesse. And that's basically like what the big men are now in this day and age. They are more so finesse basketball players, whereas though back in the day it was more about power and brute strength, man. And you can't compare the two. Um, yeah, but the league had a hard time expanding when you had Shaq in the league, because basically they couldn't find nobody that would match up with him. You had to have your team constructed a certain kind of way to be able to contain Shaq. And as long as everybody's team was constructed in the way that it was constructed, then that means that you couldn't bring over the European basketball players because they wasn't accustomed to playing that style of basketball, that physical play. And so they got the stretch, what is it, the stretch fours and the stretch fives and stuff like that. But like I said, a lot of people do not talk about how Shaq changed the game. Like Michael Jordan made it more. Michael Jordan and all those guys made it more attractive to the world, and other people around the world say, "Oh yeah, they want to go and play in the NBA," and it was good for business. But as long as Shaq was in the league, man, and especially when he was in his prime, think about it. 92 Dream Team is when, that's 92 the Dream Team. That's when Team USA went around the world, almost like on a publicity tour, just marketing NBA basketball to the world. Everybody got excited about it, right? And you could bring over foreign, like I said, certain foreign players, you could bring them over and mix them in with the NBA, but you could not bring these big guys over. And if you can't bring the big guys over, then and then look at this. When you talk about guard play, like foreign born guards don't match up with the guards that was you had Chauncey Billups. Was Chauncey Billups like 6'4", 6'5"? You had Jason Kidd around 6'4", 6'5". Uh Brandon Roy, who else around 6'4", 6'5"? So the prototypical point guard, Mark Jackson around 6'4", 6'5". Think about this. Prototypical point guard in NBA was like about 6'4", 6'5". You have never seen a 6'4", 6'5" point guard from any other country besides, USA. You need to, in order for your point guard to have some success playing in the NBA, he's going to have to be 6'8", around that because he needs to have some type of built-in advantage because though, like I said, if you bring over a guard from another country and he's 6'4", 6'5", just like the guys who are here 6'4", 6'5", then he not gonna be able to match their physicality. So that's the NBA just changed a whole lot of ways, whereas though subtle ways that people don't understand. They try to Luca 6'8", 6'8" point guard. So he has on the average point guard, American born point guard, he got a 4-inch advantage. Right. He's 4 inches taller and he's heavier. So that gives him an advantage. Whereas though if you bring somebody in who is like 6'4" from another country, they're not gonna be able to compete with these guards over here because these guards are so much more physical, so much more athletic, and so they changed the game in a lot of little subtle ways that people really don't talk about. And I can name a whole bunch of guards from the NBA who were like around that height, around 6'4" and 6'5", those prototypical NBA guards, man, who had the height and the strength to be able to get where they wanted to go on that court. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this up, just talk about how Shaq changed the game more so um than what a lot of people think. And so that's my take on it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, I'm gonna check you all out in the next video. Peace.